Under the flickering streetlights of a fading afternoon, the shrill wail of a siren ripped through the quiet, followed by the blinding flash of blue and red lights. A patrol car halted behind a sleek luxury SUV, and two officers approached to search the vehicle, which belonged to an innocent black woman. A devious plot was set in motion. As the male officer meticulously inspected the car, a small bag of white powder mysteriously appeared, its discovery leaving the owner utterly dumbfounded. Voices escalated, growing louder until the unmistakable clink of handcuffs echoed, followed by the officer's smug declaration, "Tell it to the judge." But just as tension peaked, a commanding voice boomed, cutting through the chaos. "There's something you both need to know." The woman reached into her coat and produced something that drained the color from both officers' faces. In that moment they realized they had made an enormous blunder. Join us in sharing powerful narratives by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to activate the notification bell to enrich your day with profound insights and heartfelt empathy. The cityscape shimmered under the last vestiges of twilight, the urban hum blending with the faint distant cry of sirens. Officer Sarah Miller sat rigidly in the police cruiser's passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly. Beside her, Officer Jack Wilson gripped the wheel, his knuckles white with frustration as he ranted venomously about recent departmental changes, his voice laced with bitterness, slicing through the uneasy quiet. "First they make one of them captain," Jack sneered, his eyes fixed ahead. "Next they'll have us taking orders from—" He caught himself glancing sideways at Sarah, who shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to engage or remain silent. It wasn't the first time she'd heard Jack's bigoted opinions, but tonight his animosity felt sharper, more perilous. "Maybe the captain's qualified," Sarah ventured hesitantly, her voice steady but cautious. "It's about time the department reflects the community, don't you think?" Jack snorted, his derision palpable. "Spare me the lecture, rookie. You'll learn soon enough. They don't belong in charge." Before Sarah could respond, Jack's attention snapped to a sleek black SUV gliding past. The driver, a composed black woman in a tailored blazer, briefly met their gaze before returning her eyes to the road. She was well within the speed limit, her turn signal activated as she changed lanes. Jack's lips curled into a sneer. "Look at that, driving around like she owns the place. Probably doesn't even belong in this neighborhood." Sarah's stomach churned. "She hasn't done anything wrong," she said quickly, her voice edged with unease. Jack's grin turned predatory as he activated the cruiser's lights. "We'll see about that." The SUV pulled over smoothly, the driver's movements deliberate and composed. Sarah's chest tightened as Jack exited the cruiser with an air of arrogant authority. She followed reluctantly, her boots crunching on the pavement, her instincts screaming that this was deeply wrong. The SUV's window lowered, revealing the driver's poised face. A black woman around 50 with distinctive curly black hair, wearing an elegant suit. Her face exuded seriousness and professionalism, her gaze steady but wary, her hands resting visibly on the steering wheel. "Good evening, officer," she said calmly, her voice carrying an unshakable dignity. "Is there a problem?" Jack leaned into the window, his eyes narrowing. "License and registration," he demanded curtly. The woman's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her documents. Sarah noticed the tremor and felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't just a routine stop and everyone present knew it. "Name?" Jack barked as he scanned the license. "Elaine Davis," the woman replied evenly. "I'm heading to a meeting." Jack's lip curled. "A meeting in this part of town?" He let the words hang in the air, dripping with insinuation. Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Is there a law against that?" Jack ignored her and handed the license to Sarah, gesturing toward the car. "Mind if we take a look inside, Miss Davis?" "Actually, I do mind," Elaine replied firmly, her composure unbroken. "I've done nothing wrong and I don't consent to a search." Jack's smirk widened, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "Refusing to cooperate, huh? What are you hiding?" Sarah's breath hitched. Jack's tone had shifted, his aggression barely concealed. Before she could intervene, Jack yanked the door open with unnecessary force, startling Elaine. "This is unnecessary," Elaine protested, stepping out of the vehicle. Jack ignored her, crouching to peer into the car. As Sarah moved closer, her heart sank. She saw it clearly. Jack's hand slipping into his pocket and sliding something beneath the driver's seat. A small plastic bag of white powder glinted in the dim streetlight. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just prejudice. This was a calculated setup. Well, well, Jack said, standing with a triumphant grin and holding up the bag. What do we have here? Looks like someone's been busy. Elaine's eyes widened, her face a mask of shock and fury. That's not mine, she exclaimed. You planted that. Jack's smirk deepened. Tell it to the judge, he said, reaching for his handcuffs. Stop. Sarah's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, slicing through the tension like a blade. Jack froze mid-motion, his head whipping around to face her. What the hell are you doing, rookie? He snarled. Sarah's heart pounded as she took a step forward, her hands trembling but steadying herself with each word. I saw what you did, Jack. You planted that evidence. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. Elaine's eyes, filled with both hope and disbelief, flicked between the two officers. Jack's face darkened with fury. You don't know what you're talking about, he hissed, his voice low and menacing. Think carefully, rookie. You want to throw away your career over this? Over her. Sarah's pulse quickened, her father's voice echoing in her mind. Stand up for what's right, even if you stand alone. If doing the right thing costs me my badge, she said, her voice steady and resolute, then so be it. Elaine stood motionless, her dignity intact despite the surrounding chaos. Sarah stepped closer, shielding Elaine from Jack's looming figure. This stops here, Sarah said firmly. We're not arresting an innocent woman. Jack's jaw clenched, his rage barely contained. The confrontation teetered on the edge of violence, the air crackling with tension. And then Elaine spoke, her voice calm but commanding. Officers, she said, drawing herself up to her full height. I think there's something you both need to know. Elaine reached into her jacket and Sarah's breath caught when Elaine pulled out her badge. Sarah's heart stopped. I'm Captain Elaine Davis, she said, her voice laced with quiet authority. The new head of your precinct. Jack's face went pale, his confidence draining in an instant. Sarah's eyes widened, the weight of the moment crashing down around her. The street seemed to freeze in time as Captain Elaine Davis held her badge aloft, its polished surface gleaming under the streetlights. The tension, already crackling in the air, now felt like a thunderclap waiting to break. Officer Jack Wilson, who had moments before been brimming with smug authority, stood paralyzed, his complexion draining to an ashen hue. Captain? Jack's voice faltered, disbelief dripping from every syllable. He blinked rapidly as though trying to wake himself from a nightmare. That's impossible. Elaine's expression was unreadable, her voice cool and precise as she responded. I assure you it's very possible. I was en route to meet with the commissioner when you decided to single me out. She paused, her tone hardening, without cause. Sarah Miller, still processing the revelation, stepped closer to Elaine. Her mind raced, but one thing was clear. Jack's actions had escalated this encounter into something far more consequential than a routine traffic stop. Her stomach churned as she realized the fallout this could bring, not just for Jack but for the entire precinct. Captain, Sarah began, her voice trembling with equal parts regret and resolve. I'm so sorry. I saw what he did and I should have spoken up sooner. Elaine turned her sharp gaze toward Sarah, her demeanor softening just slightly. And yet you've chosen to speak now. That matters. Jack, his bravado crumbling, attempted to claw back control of the situation. Captain Davis, I think we can clear this up, he stammered. It was a misunderstanding, a mix-up, that's all. This is just enough. Elaine cut him off sharply, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. She stepped closer to Jack, her eyes narrowing. You planted evidence in my car, Officer Wilson, and Officer Miller witnessed the entire thing. Jack's lips parted, his excuses dying on his tongue. Elaine's presence seemed to shrink him, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his mistake. You've tarnished the badge you wear, Elaine continued, her voice steady but charged with anger. This is not policing. This is abuse of power and I will not tolerate it in my precinct. The streetlights flickered, and the faint hum of distant traffic underscored the charged silence. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, torn between relief that Elaine was taking control and the looming dread of what this confrontation could mean for her own future. Her loyalty to the department was ingrained, But tonight she had chosen a different loyalty. To the truth. Jack's desperation grew. "You don't understand," he said, his voice cracking. "We've been getting reports about drug trafficking in this area. I was doing my job." Elaine raised a hand, silencing him. "Don't insult my intelligence, Officer Wilson. Your job is to uphold the law, not twist it to suit your biases. Your actions tonight were not only unethical but illegal." The quiet scrape of Sarah's boot against the pavement broke the silence as she stepped forward, her voice tentative but firm. "Captain, I'm willing to file a report to document everything I saw." Elaine nodded, her expression softening as she regarded Sarah. "You made a difficult choice tonight, Officer Miller. That takes courage." Sarah swallowed hard, the weight of her decision sinking in. She knew the consequences of standing against Jack could be severe, but she also knew it was the only way to honor the values she had sworn to uphold. Elaine turned her attention back to Jack, her voice cold and unyielding. "You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. Hand over your badge and weapon." Jack froze, his face a mask of disbelief. "You can't do this," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I've given 20 years to this force." Elaine's eyes blazed. "And in those 20 years, how many lives have you ruined with your prejudice and misconduct? How many people have suffered because of officers like you? This isn't just about me, Officer Wilson. This is about every person you failed to serve with dignity." As if on cue, the distant sound of sirens began to grow louder, signaling the arrival of backup. The flashing red and blue lights painted the street in shifting hues, illuminating the small crowd of onlookers that had begun to gather. Phones were out, recording every word, every movement. The weight of public scrutiny bore down on the scene. Jack, realizing the finality of his situation, reluctantly unclipped his badge and holster, his hands trembling as he handed them to Elaine. The act seemed to drain the last vestiges of his defiance, leaving him hollow and defeated. Elaine took the items without a word, her expression a mask of controlled fury. She turned to Sarah. "Escort him back to the station. I'll be filing my report directly with Internal Affairs." Sarah hesitated, glancing at Jack, who now looked utterly broken. "Yes, Captain," she said firmly, stepping forward to guide him to the cruiser. As Jack was led away, Elaine turned to the onlookers, her voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. "What you've seen tonight is not reflective of what this department stands for. We will hold those who betray the trust of this community accountable. That's a promise." The sirens grew closer, the sound merging with the whispers of the crowd. Elaine stood tall, her badge glinting under the streetlights, a symbol of the justice she vowed to uphold. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was the start of something much bigger. The sirens grew louder until 2 patrol cars arrived on the scene, followed by an unmarked black sedan. Officers stepped out cautiously, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. Word had already spread across the precinct that something significant was happening on Maple Street, but none of them had expected to find Captain Elaine Davis standing in the middle of the chaos. Elaine turned to the approaching officers, her presence commanding despite the lingering tension in the air. "Secure the scene," she ordered firmly. "Officer Miller is transporting Officer Wilson back to the station. I'll be filing charges against him personally." The officers exchanged uneasy glances before nodding and moving to their tasks. This wasn't a standard situation, and the weight of Elaine's authority pressed on everyone present. Jack Wilson's defeated figure was now seated in the back of a cruiser, his face turned away from the crowd as if to shield himself from their judgment. Elaine exhaled deeply, the adrenaline of the confrontation still coursing through her. She knew the next steps would be even more challenging. The incident wasn't just about Jack's misconduct. It would ripple through the department, forcing them all to confront uncomfortable truths about systemic biases and abuses of power. By the time Elaine arrived at the precinct, the atmosphere was electric. Officers were gathered in small clusters, their hushed conversations halting the moment Elaine walked through the doors. The tension was palpable. No one knew what to expect. Elaine strode into the briefing room, her steps deliberate and measured. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. What had happened? What would happen next? Officer Sarah Miller followed close behind, her face pale but resolute. She carried the paperwork documenting Jack's misconduct, her hands trembling slightly. Elaine paused at the head of the room, allowing the silence to settle before she spoke. "Today," she began, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "our department failed to uphold its commitment to protect and serve. An innocent citizen was subjected to racial profiling, harassment, and a deliberate act of evidence tampering by one of our own." The room remained silent, but the expressions of those gathered ranged from shock to quiet acknowledgement. Everyone knew Jack Wilson's reputation, but hearing it stated so plainly by their captain was a stark wake-up call. Elaine continued, her tone resolute. "This is not who we are, or at least it's not who we should be. Our community expects better. They deserve better, and it starts with holding ourselves accountable." She turned to Sarah. "Officer Miller witnessed the misconduct firsthand and has chosen to step forward to report what she saw. This act of courage represents the values we should all strive to uphold." Sarah's cheeks flushed as the room's attention shifted to her, but she held her head high. Her actions had placed her in a precarious position among her peers, but the weight of Elaine's praise gave her strength. Elaine's gaze swept across the room, her voice rising. "I've already reported this incident to Internal Affairs, and a full investigation is underway. Officer Wilson has been suspended and will face disciplinary action, including potential criminal charges." A murmur rippled through the room, the gravity of Elaine's words sinking in. This was more than a reprimand. It was a reckoning. The following days were a whirlwind. News of the incident spread quickly, both within the department and throughout the community. Local media caught wind of the story, and the public's reaction was swift and intense. Protests erupted outside the station, demanding transparency and reform. Elaine met with city officials and community leaders, addressing their concerns and pledging to root out the systemic issues that had allowed officers like Jack Wilson to operate unchecked. The conversations were difficult, often heated, but Elaine refused to back down. Meanwhile, Sarah faced her own challenges. Some of her colleagues viewed her as a traitor for speaking out, while others quietly expressed their support. She found herself walking a lonely path, but Elaine's guidance and encouragement kept her grounded. "I won't lie to you," Elaine told Sarah during one of their late-night conversations in the captain's office. "This will be hard. You'll face pushback and it won't always be fair. But doing the right thing rarely is." Sarah nodded, her resolve solidifying. "I understand, Captain. I couldn't stand by and let it happen." Elaine smiled faintly. "And because of that, you've already made a difference." The day of Jack Wilson's disciplinary hearing arrived, and the precinct was abuzz with anticipation. Elaine stood at the front of the room, presenting the evidence of his misconduct with precision and clarity. Sarah's testimony was a pivotal moment, her voice steady as she recounted the events of that fateful night. Jack sat silently throughout the proceedings, his once confident demeanor replaced by a hollow resignation. When the decision came, termination and criminal charges, he barely reacted, as though the weight of his actions had already crushed him. As the room emptied, Elaine stood alone for a moment, staring at the empty chair where Jack had sat. This wasn't a victory, she realized. It was a necessary step, but there was still so much work to do. In the weeks that followed, Elaine spearheaded a series of reforms within the department. Mandatory bias training, stricter oversight, and an anonymous reporting system were just the beginning. She also worked closely with community leaders to rebuild trust, holding town hall meetings to hear directly from the people her officers served. Sarah became a symbol of integrity within the precinct, her bravery inspiring others to step forward and challenge the status quo. Though the path was difficult, she found purpose in her role, determined to be the kind of officer her community could rely on. Elaine too found renewed resolve. The road ahead was long and the fight for justice was far from over, but she was ready to face it head-on. Together, she and her team were determined to create a department that truly lived up to its promise, to protect and serve everyone equally and without prejudice. The Zenith City Police Department would never be the same, and that was the point. The reforms Elaine Davis implemented began to take root, but the transformation of the Zenith City Police Department was far from smooth. Resistance, both subtle and overt, emerged from within the ranks. Some officers felt betrayed, others claimed the changes were unnecessary, and a few outright resigned in protest. Elaine expected this. Real change was always met with opposition. What she hadn't anticipated was how quickly the broader community would rally behind her efforts. Protests that had once demanded accountability outside the precinct shifted to organized town halls and community forums, spearheaded by Elaine and her leadership team. Local activists, pastors, and business owners worked alongside her, shaping a vision for a department that didn't just enforce the law but partnered with the community it served. Sarah Miller became a regular face at these gatherings, her story of standing up to corruption resonating deeply with citizens who had long felt silenced. She spoke candidly about her internal conflict, her fears, and her ultimate decision to act. Her bravery inspired other officers to step forward, some with confessions of their own mistakes, others with ideas to better connect with the community. Meanwhile, the fallout from Jack Wilson's actions rippled outward. His trial became a national story, and Elaine was thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of integrity and reform. Jack's defense tried to paint him as a victim of political correctness and a changing culture, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His body cam footage, witness testimonies including Sarah's, and Elaine's direct intervention left no doubt about his guilt. The jury deliberated for less than a day before convicting him of evidence tampering, abuse of power, and racial profiling. He was sentenced to prison, and while his conviction was a step toward justice, Elaine couldn't help but feel the sting of loss. Jack had been a product of a broken system, one she was now tasked with rebuilding. The precinct's reputation began to shift in small but meaningful ways. New recruits, inspired by the department's commitment to inclusivity, joined with fresh perspectives and ideals. Officers who had once been hesitant to embrace reform found themselves slowly adopting the new training programs, which emphasized de-escalation, community outreach, and accountability. Complaints of misconduct began to drop, replaced by commendations from citizens who had never before felt comfortable praising law enforcement. Elaine worked tirelessly, often late into the night, reviewing policies, meeting with stakeholders, and mentoring officers like Sarah. She knew the transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but every small victory, a child feeling safe in their neighborhood, a family trusting an officer to protect them, reminded her why she had taken on this monumental task. One evening, months after the confrontation that had sparked this change, Elaine found herself back at the spot where Jack had pulled her over. The street was quiet now, the city lights casting a warm glow over the asphalt. She parked her car and stepped out, taking a deep breath as she surveyed the scene. The memory of that night lingered, the fear and frustration etched into her mind, but so too did the resolve it had ignited. Sarah joined her a few minutes later, her face illuminated by the streetlight. "I thought I'd find you here," she said softly. Elaine smiled faintly. "I was just thinking about how far we've come and how far we still have to go." Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You've changed so much already. People see it, feel it. But it's not just the department you've transformed, Captain. It's me. You gave me the courage to stand up, to believe I could make a difference." Elaine turned to Sarah, her expression softening. "You made that choice, Sarah. You had the courage all along. I just reminded you it was there." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past and the hope for the future settling around them. The road ahead would be long, filled with setbacks and challenges, but they weren't alone. They had each other, their community, and the unshakable belief that justice wasn't just a destination but a journey worth fighting for. As the city hummed quietly around them, Elaine looked toward the skyline and spoke, her voice steady and resolute. "This is just the beginning. Together we'll make sure this city becomes the place it was always meant to be. A place where justice isn't just a promise but a reality." Sarah nodded, the fire of determination burning in her eyes. "Let's get to work. And now join the movement for justice. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and make these stories a part of your daily life. Together we can create change.